called her cursed, said her scarred hands were marked by the gods' displeasure. For 4 years, Astrid scrubbed floors, hauled waste, and lived in the shadows of a Viking household where she was less than nothing. Just another thrall. Invisible. Worthless. Until the moment the Jarl's 6-year-old son started choking at a feast, turning purple in front of frozen warriors and helpless healers. In that split second, Astrid had to choose. Obey every rule that kept her alive, or break them all, to save a dying child. What she did next would put her life on trial before the most powerful men in 3 clans, but saving the heir was only the beginning. Because in a world built on rigid hierarchy and ancient tradition, one desperate act of courage would expose a conspiracy so dark, it would force everyone to question everything they believed about power, worth, and whose hands the gods truly favor. Some acts of bravery don't set you free. They make you a target, and Astrid was about to discover that the most dangerous enemy isn't the one who hates you for failing, but the one who hates you for succeeding. The sound hit first, not the polite cough of a man clearing his throat, but something wet and desperate. A choking, gurgling noise that made every conversation in the great hall stop like someone had sliced through the air with a blade. Astrid's hands froze mid-scrub on the wooden bucket she'd been cleaning near the kitchen entrance. That sound. She knew that sound. Her chest tightened with a memory she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. Her baby brother, blue lips, tiny body convulsing. She looked up. The Jarl's son was dying. Little Bjorn sat at the high table, his small face turning a shade of purple that didn't belong on living flesh. His hands clawed at his throat. His eyes were wide, so wide, filled with the kind of animal terror that doesn't understand why the heir won't come. 6 years old. Just 6. Around him the greatest warriors of 3 clans sat, frozen. Jarl Halvard, his father, had both hands on the table, knuckles white, mouth open but producing no sound. The boy's mother, Lady Ragnhild, was screaming. Just screaming, high-pitched and useless. The head healer, Einar, rushed forward with his bag of runes and herbs, his gnarled fingers shaking as he pulled out stones, muttering prayers to gods who weren't listening. 2 other healers joined him, arguing about which prayer to say first, which rune to carve, whether to make the boy drink water or lay him flat. Bjorn's lips were nearly black now. Astrid felt her legs moving before her mind caught up. The bucket clattered to the floor, dirty water spreading across the rushes. Her feet carried her forward, through the crowd of frozen nobility, past the guards who were too shocked to stop a thrall from approaching the high table. "Get back!" Einar snarled when he saw her. "Unclean hands! You'll curse him!" Astrid didn't stop, couldn't stop. That sound, that horrible, wet choking. She'd heard it before. She'd fixed it before. She grabbed Bjorn from behind, her scarred hands wrapping around his small chest. He was so light, so terribly light. His body was rigid with panic, every muscle locked in the fight for air that wasn't coming. "She's touching the air!" someone shouted. "Stop her!" But Astrid was already moving. She positioned her fist just below his ribcage, wrapped her other hand over it, and pulled inward and upward with brutal force. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Bjorn's body was going limp in her arms. The room had gone quiet except for Ragnhild's sobbing. Astrid pulled harder, putting every ounce of desperate strength into the motion. She thought of her brother, how she'd been 12 years old and alone in their hovel, when he'd choked on a piece of dried fish, how she'd hit his back first, then grabbed him like this, yanked so hard she thought she'd broken his ribs, how he'd finally coughed up that piece of fish and then cried in her arms for an hour. She yanked again. A chunk of meat flew from Bjorn's mouth and skittered across the table, landing in someone's mead cup. The boy gasped. A horrible, ragged sound that was the most beautiful thing Astrid had ever heard. He sucked in air like a drowning man breaking the surface, each breath a desperate, wheezing sob. His color started to return, purple fading to red, red fading to pink. He was breathing. Astrid lowered him carefully to his chair, her hand still supporting his small back. He was shaking, so was she. The hall erupted. Jarl Halvard rushed to his son, pulling the boy into his arms, checking his face, his throat, his chest. Bjorn clung to his father and wept, the terrified crying of a child who'd just seen his own death. But Ragnhild wasn't moving toward her son. She was staring at Astrid with an expression that made ice form in Astrid's stomach. Horror. Pure, undiluted horror. "What did you do?" Ragnhild's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through. The now silent hall. "What did you do to my son?" Astrid took a step back, suddenly aware of where she was, what she'd done. Her scarred hands, the hands everyone called cursed, had touched the Jarl's heir. The future of the entire clan had been in her grip. "My lady, You touched him!" Ragnhild's voice rose to a shriek. "Your filthy, cursed hands on my son!" Einar seized the moment, stepping forward with his chest puffed out. "My lady is right to be concerned. These were not the proper methods. The runes should have been consulted first. The gods should have been asked for guidance." The boy was dying, Astrid heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Steady, too steady. There was no time for runes. The slap came so fast she didn't see it. Ragnhild's palm cracked across Astrid's face hard enough to snap her head to the side. The taste of copper flooded her mouth. "You will not speak." Ragnhild was shaking now, her beautiful face twisted with something that looked less like anger and more like terror. "Guards, take this thrall to the pit. Now!" Strong hands grabbed Astrid's arms. She didn't resist as they dragged her backward, away from the high table, away from Bjorn, who was still crying into his father's chest. Just before they pulled her through the door, Astrid saw Jarl Halvard raise his head. His eyes met hers across the hall. In them, she saw something complicated. Gratitude, maybe, or confusion, or something darker she couldn't name. Then the door slammed shut, and she was in the cold darkness of the storage pit beneath the great hall, listening to the muffled sounds of chaos above. Her cheek throbbed. Her hands were shaking. And somewhere in her chest, a tiny voice whispered the question that would haunt her in the long night ahead. Had she just saved her own life, or ended it? The pit smelled like rotting turnips and despair. Astrid sat in the darkness with her back against the cold stone wall, counting her heartbeats because it was the only thing she could control. Above her, through the gaps in the floorboards, she could hear the feast continuing. Laughter, music, the scrape of benches. Life going on as if a child hadn't nearly died an hour ago. Her cheek still burned where Ragnhild had struck her. She touched it gently, felt the swelling already starting. Tomorrow it would be purple, like Bjorn's face had been. Purple and wrong. Footsteps overhead, heavy ones, moving with purpose toward the pit. Door. Astrid's breath caught. They were coming for her. Of course they were. You don't touch the Jarl's heir and live to see morning, not when you're a thrall, not when your hands are already marked as cursed. The door opened. Torchlight flooded down the ladder, blinding after the darkness. Astrid raised her scarred hand to shield her eyes. "Get up." The voice belonged to Sten, the head guard, a man who'd never spoken a kind word to anyone below his station in his entire life. "Lady Ragnhild wants you." Astrid climbed the ladder on shaking legs. Her whole body felt like it belonged to someone else, someone braver, someone stupider. They didn't take her back to the great hall. Instead, Sten led her through the narrow passages behind the kitchen, past the sleeping quarters where the other thralls would be bedding down soon, to a small room Astrid had only seen once before, the healing chamber. Ragnhild stood in the center of the room, her back rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Einar was there too, along with two other healers Astrid didn't know. Old men with long beards and pouches full of bones and dried herbs. The kind of men who spoke in riddles and charged fortunes to read the future in sheep intestines. "Bring her closer," Ragnhild said without turning around. Sten pushed Astrid forward until she stood just a few feet from the lady. This close, Astrid could see that Ragnhild's hands weren't just clasped, they were trembling. "Tell me, exactly what you did." Ragnhild's voice was eerily calm now. The screaming woman from the hall had been replaced by something colder, something more dangerous. Every detail, every movement. Astrid swallowed. Her mouth was dry. "I grabbed him from behind, my lady, put my fist below his ribs, pulled inward and upward until the meat came out." "And where did you learn this technique?" Einar stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "What thrall knows healing arts? Who taught you this dark method?" "It's not dark." The words came out before Astrid could stop them. It works. My baby brother choked when I was 12. I tried hitting his back like I'd seen people do, but it didn't work. So I grabbed him and squeezed and the food came out. That's all." "That's all?" One of the old healers laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. "You think the gods give knowledge to thralls, to young girls with cursed hands? This reeks of forbidden practices." Astrid's heart hammered against her. "Ribs. I didn't do anything forbidden. I just remembered what worked before. I didn't use magic or prayers or anything else. Just my hands. Your hands." Ragnhild finally turned around. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. But there was something else there too. Something that made Astrid's stomach drop. Fear, pure maternal fear. The same hands that are scarred from fire, the same hands that everyone says are marked by the gods' displeasure. "They're just scars, my lady, from an accident when I was a child." "Are they?" Ragnhild moved closer, so close Astrid could smell the lavender oil in her hair, the mead on her breath. "Or are they marks of something darker? Tell me, thrall, when you touched my son, did you feel anything? Any power flowing through you? Any voice telling you what to do?" Astrid wanted to lie. Wanted to say yes, she'd felt the gods speaking. Wanted to give this terrified mother some explanation that would make sense of the impossible thing that had happened. But the truth was simpler and somehow more frightening. "I felt scared," Astrid said quietly. "I felt desperate. I remembered my brother's face turning blue and I couldn't let it happen again. That's all I felt, my lady. Fear and desperation." The silence that followed was suffocating. Einar broke it first. "My lady, I must advise caution. The boy lives, yes, but at what cost? We don't know what forces this thrall may have invoked, knowingly or not. I recommend a purification ritual. Immediately, and this one should be kept far from young Bjorn until we're certain no dark influence remains." "I agree," the older healer added. "The method she describes is unnatural, violent, not the way of proper healing. We should consult the runes, make offerings, ensure the boy's spirit wasn't damaged by such rough handling." Ragnhild stood very still. Astrid could see the war playing out behind her eyes, the mother who was grateful her son breathed, the lady who couldn't afford to show weakness or acknowledge that a thrall had succeeded where her expensive healers had failed. The woman who'd lost 3 babies before Bjorn and lived every day in terror of losing him too. "Tomorrow," Ragnhild said finally, "you will undergo purification. Einar will perform the ritual. If the gods show favor, if there's no sign of dark influence, then—" She paused, her jaw tightening. "Then we will discuss what happens next. And if the gods don't show favor?" Astrid heard herself ask. Ragnhild's eyes went cold. "Then you'll burn, the same way your hands did, and this time, all of you will carry the mark." Sten grabbed Astrid's arm, pulling her toward the door. But just as they reached it, a small voice called out from the hallway, "Mother?" Everyone turned. Bjorn stood in the doorway, his hand clutching his father's tunic. His face was still pale, his eyes swollen from crying. He looked so small in his fine clothes, so fragile, like a strong wind could carry him away. He looked directly at Astrid. "Is she in trouble because of me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Ragnhild opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. Jarl Halvard placed his hand on his son's head. "Go back to bed, Bjorn. This doesn't concern you." "But she helped me." Bjorn's voice was hoarse from the trauma his throat had endured. "She made the food come out. She saved me." "That's enough." Halvard's voice was firm but not unkind. He looked at his wife, then at Astrid, then back to his son. "We'll speak of this tomorrow." As Sten dragged her back toward the pit, Astrid caught one last glimpse of Bjorn's face. The confusion there, the innocent certainty that good deeds should be rewarded, that saving someone's life should make you a hero, not a prisoner. She wondered how long it would take before the world taught him differently. Dawn came with the sound of whispers. Astrid woke in the pit to voices drifting through the floorboards above. Harsh voices. Angry voices, but not angry at her, angry about her. She thinks she's special now. That was Gerda, another thrall who worked in the kitchens. Her voice dripped with venom. Touch the golden boy, and now she expects what? Freedom, a place at the high table. I heard Lady Ragnhild slapped her. That was Finn who cleaned the stables. Good. Someone needs to remind her what she is. What she is, Gerda hissed, is dangerous. For all of us. You think the Jarl's going to treat us any better? Because one thrall got lucky? No. He'll expect miracles from all of us now. And when we can't deliver, we'll pay the price. Astrid pressed her scarred palms against her eyes. She hadn't thought about that, hadn't thought about anything beyond the moment, beyond Bjorn's purple face and that terrible choking sound. But Gerda was right. She'd broken an invisible rule. Thralls don't save heirs. Thralls don't make healers look foolish. Thralls don't draw attention. The pit door opened. This time it wasn't Sten, but a younger guard named Eric. He looked uncomfortable, wouldn't meet her eyes. "Time for the purification," he muttered. "Don't make this difficult." Astrid climbed out into the gray morning light. The great hall was empty now, the tables cleared, the rushes swept. But the healing chamber was crowded. Einar stood in the center with his two ancient colleagues, all three surrounded by bowls of smoking herbs, carved runes, and bundles of dried plants Astrid couldn't name. Ragnhild sat on a chair against the wall, her face unreadable. Jarl Halvard stood beside her, his arms crossed, and in the corner, trying to make himself small, was Bjorn. His nurse kept trying to lead him away, but he planted his feet and refused to move. "Strip to your shift," Einar commanded. Astrid's face burned, but she obeyed. She pulled off her rough woolen dress, standing in only the thin linen undergarment that barely reached her knees. The morning air was cold. She could see her breath. Einar began. The ritual. He circled her 3 times, chanting in the old tongue, words Astrid didn't understand. He threw herbs into the fire, creating clouds of acrid smoke that made her eyes water. He drew runes in the air with a bone knife, muttering prayers to gods who'd never answered a single one of her own prayers. Then he reached for the bowl of salt water. "This will reveal the truth," he announced loudly, playing to his audience. "If dark forces guided her hands, the blessed water will burn her skin. If she's pure, it will cleanse her." He poured the water over Astrid's scarred hands. It was ice cold, that was all. No burning, no smoking, just cold, salty water dripping onto the floor. Einar frowned. He tried again, this time pouring the water over her head, soaking her hair, her shift, making her shiver violently. Nothing happened. The older healers exchanged glances. One of them stepped forward with a different bowl, this one filled with ash mixed with oil. He smeared it across Astrid's forehead, down her cheeks, across her scarred palms, muttering constantly. Still nothing. "The runes," Einar said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Cast the runes." They threw carved stones onto the floor. The healers bent over them, reading patterns Astrid couldn't see. Their faces grew more confused with each passing moment. "Well?" Halvard's voice cut through the chanting. "What do the runes say?" The eldest healer straightened slowly, his joints cracking. "They say, nothing, my lord." "Nothing?" "No dark influence, no blessing either, just..." He gestured vaguely at Astrid. "Just a thrall who remembered something she'd seen before." The silence was deafening. Ragnhild stood abruptly. "That's impossible. There must be something. Try again." "My lady," the healer said carefully, "we've tried every test. The water, The ash, the runes, the smoke. There's no magic here, no divine intervention. She simply knew what to do. Because I'd done it before, Astrid said. Quietly. That's all. I'd saved my brother the same way. I just remembered. Einar's face had gone red. My lady, the tests may not show dark influence, but that doesn't mean she should be rewarded for bypassing proper healing methods. She acted without permission, without consulting those of us trained in the sacred arts. That kind of insubordination saved my son's life. Halvard's voice was quiet, but it stopped Einar mid-sentence. While you were arguing about which prayer to say first, this thrall was saving my heir. Einar opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish drowning in air. My lord, I only meant... I know what you meant. Halvard moved closer to Astrid. She forced herself not to flinch, to meet his gaze even though every instinct screamed at her to lower her eyes. You, he said to her. What's your name? Astrid, my lord. How long have you served in my household? 4 years, my lord, since my mother died in childbirth. And in those 4 years... Have you ever caused trouble? Ever given anyone reason to doubt your loyalty? Astrid thought about all the times she'd bitten her tongue, all the insults she'd swallowed, all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep in the cold servants' quarters. No, my lord. Halvard turned to his wife. The tests show nothing. The runes show nothing. Our son lives because of her quick action. He paused. What would you have me do? Ragnhild's hands were shaking again. Astrid could see the war raging behind. Her eyes, gratitude fighting terror, relief battling paranoia. I want her kept away from Bjorn, Ragnhild said finally. I don't care what the tests show. Those hands touched my son. Until I'm certain there are no lingering effects, no delayed consequences. She stays away from him. Mother, no. Bjorn's small voice rang out. He pushed past his nurse, running to stand between Astrid and his parents. She helped me. Why are you being mean to her? Bjorn, you don't understand. I understand. She saved me. Tears streamed down his pale cheeks. I understand. Everyone else just stood there. I couldn't breathe and I was so scared, and she made it stop. His voice broke on the last word, dissolving into sobs. Ragnhild looked like she'd been struck. She reached for her son, but he pulled away, wiping his nose on his sleeve. She's my friend now, Bjorn declared with the absolute certainty only a 6-year-old could muster, and friends don't let friends get punished for helping. The guards shifted uncomfortably. The healers stared at their feet. Halvard rubbed his temples like his head ached, and Astrid realized with dawning horror that she'd just become the center of a conflict she never wanted, never asked for, and had no idea how to escape. 3 days passed like walking through fog. Astrid was assigned to the farthest reaches of the compound, mucking out the goat pens on the eastern edge where the wind cut like knives and the smell was thick enough to taste. Away from the great hall, away from the family quarters, away from Bjorn. But distance didn't solve the problem. It made it worse. The first night, Bjorn had nightmares. Astrid heard about it from Gerda, who heard it from one of the house servants. The boy woke up screaming, clawing at his throat, reliving the moment he couldn't breathe. His nurse tried to calm him. Ragnhild held him and sang lullabies. Halvard sat by his bedside until dawn. Nothing worked. The second night was worse. Bjorn refused to eat, convinced any food would choke him again. He pushed away his dinner, his breakfast, even the honey cakes he loved. His face grew gaunt. His eyes developed dark circles that looked wrong on someone so young. By the third day, Ragnhild's composure had cracked completely. Astrid was hauling a bucket of goat waste to the compost heap when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Ragnhild standing there, alone, without guards or servants. The lady's hair was disheveled, her dress wrinkled. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. He won't stop asking for you, Ragnhild said without preamble. Her voice was hoarse. Every hour, every meal. Where's Astrid? Why can't I see Astrid? Is Astrid angry with me? Over and over until I want to scream. Astrid set down the bucket carefully. My lady, I never meant— I know what you meant. Ragnhild's laugh was bitter. You meant to save him, and you did. And now my son, my only surviving child, the heir to everything we've built, thinks a thrall with cursed hands is his guardian angel. She pressed her palms against her eyes. Do you have any idea what that does to me? What it means? Astrid said nothing. What could she say? I lost 3 before him. Ragnhild's hands dropped. Her eyes were red, raw, haunted. 3 babies. The first lived 2 days. The second never drew breath at all. The third lived long enough for me to name her Freya. She had his eyes. Her voice cracked. I buried her myself because I couldn't trust anyone else to be gentle with her. The wind howled between them. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleated. When Bjorn was born healthy, I made a vow, Ragnhild continued. I would protect him from everything, every illness, every danger, every possible threat. I consulted healers before he was conceived. I wore protective amulets throughout the pregnancy. I had Einar perform blessing rituals every month of my term. She laughed again, that same broken sound. And when he finally came, perfect and screaming and alive, I thought the gods had finally forgiven me for whatever sin made me lose the others. My lady. And then you. Ragnhild's eyes bored into Astrid. You, with your scarred hands and your impossible knowledge, you saved him when my expensive healers couldn't. You did in seconds what they couldn't do with all their runes and prayers and years of training. She stepped closer. Do you understand why I hate you? Not because you hurt him, because you proved that everything I believed, everything I paid for, everything I did to protect him, was worthless. The honesty of it struck Astrid like a physical blow. She'd expected anger, accusation, threats, not this raw, bleeding confession. You didn't do anything wrong, Astrid said quietly. You loved him. You protected him. That's what mothers do. Is it? Ragnhild's eyes glistened. Because right now, my protection is killing him. He won't eat, won't sleep, won't let anyone comfort him except the one person I've forbidden him to see. She wiped her eyes roughly. Halvard says I'm being unreasonable. The healers found nothing wrong with you. The tests were clear. But I can't. Her voice broke completely. I can't lose him. I can't bury another child. And I don't know how to protect him from his own memories. Astrid's throat was tight. She thought about her own brother, the little boy she'd raised until the Jarl's men took him away to settle a debt. She thought about the nights she still woke up reaching for a child who wasn't there anymore. Let me see him, Astrid heard herself say. Just once. Just long enough to show him I'm all right, that he's all right. Maybe then he'll eat. Ragnhild stared at her for a long moment. And if he gets attached, if seeing you makes it worse, then you send me away. Sell me to another household. I'll go quietly. You'd give up your place here for one conversation with a child who isn't yours? Astrid thought about Bjorn's small face turning purple, about his terrified eyes, about how he'd called her his friend with such absolute conviction. Yes, she said simply. Ragnhild was quiet for so long Astrid thought she'd refuse. Then slowly the lady nodded. Tonight, after the evening meal, you'll have 10 minutes, no more. She turned and walked away before Astrid could respond, her shoulders hunched against the wind like she was carrying a weight too heavy to bear. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky the color of old bruises, a guard came. To fetch Astrid, not Sten this time, but Eric, the young one who looked uncomfortable with cruelty. Clean yourself first, he muttered. You smell like goats. Astrid washed as best she could with freezing water from the well, scrubbing the dirt from under her nails, trying to tame her wild hair. It didn't help much. She still looked like what she was. A thrall, exhausted and underfed and marked by fire. Eric led her through the family quarters, down hallways she'd never been allowed in before. The walls here had tapestries. The floors had actual carpets. It smelled like pine smoke and expensive oil instead of sweat and animals. Bjorn's room was small but warm, heated by a brazier that cast dancing shadows on the walls. The boy sat on his bed, wrapped in furs, staring at nothing. He looked smaller than Astrid remembered, fragile. "Bjorn," Eric said gently, "you have a visitor." The boy's head snapped up. When he saw Astrid, his face transformed. Relief, joy, something that looked dangerously close to hope. "Astrid!" He scrambled off the bed and ran to her, wrapping his thin arms around her waist. "You came. Mother said you were angry with me, but I knew you weren't, because friends don't stay angry and we're friends, right?" Astrid knelt down so they were eye to eye. His face was even more gaunt up close. His lips were chapped. He smelled like lavender oil and fear. "I'm not angry," she said softly. "Not even a little bit." "Then why did you go away? How did you explain politics to a 6-year-old? How did you make a child understand that saving his life had complicated everything?" "I had work to do," Astrid said. "Important work. But I'm here now. Will you stay?" His eyes were so hopeful it hurt to look at them. "Will you have dinner with me? I saved you some bread. It's under my pillow so no one would take it." Astrid's heart cracked clean through. "I can't stay, little one, but I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to eat and sleep and be strong." She brushed his hair back from his forehead. "Can you do that?" His lower lip trembled. "But what if it happens again? What if I choke and you're not there? Then you'll remember what I did. You'll tell someone to do the same thing. Push here." She placed his small hand below his ribs, hard, until whatever's stuck comes out. "It hurt when you did it. I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry." His voice was fierce suddenly, startlingly adult. "You saved me. Heroes hurt people. Sometimes to help them. That's what Father says." Astrid had to look away before he saw the tears in her eyes. The summons came on the 7th day, not a guard this time, but Halvard's second in command, a grizzled warrior named Torben, who'd lost an eye in a raid 3 seasons ago. He found Astrid in the weaving room where she'd been reassigned, her fingers working the loom with the mechanical precision of someone who'd stopped thinking hours ago. "The thing convenes at midday," Torben said, without preamble. "You're to stand before the assembly." The shuttle fell from Astrid's hands, clattering against the stone floor. Around her, the other women stopped working. Gerda's face went pale. Even the overseer, a hard woman named Hilda, looked shaken. "The thing?" Astrid's voice came out as a whisper. "Why?" "Because half the visiting Jarls think you're a witch who should burn, and the other half think you're a miracle who should be freed." Torben's single eye studied her carefully. "Halvard's trying to find a middle path, but he can't decide your fate alone. Not when you touched his heir in front of witnesses from 3 clans. This has to be settled publicly." Astrid's legs felt like water. The thing, the great assembly where free men gathered to settle disputes, make laws, pass judgments. Thralls didn't stand before the thing. Thralls were property, not people. You didn't put property on trial, unless you wanted to make an example of it. What should I say? The question came out broken. The truth. Torben turned to leave, then paused. "And pray the gods favor honest tongues today. You'll need all the help you can get." The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Hilda gave Astrid water but no food, saying her stomach would betray her if she tried to eat. The other thralls avoided looking at her. Only Gerda came close, and even then she kept her distance, as if bad fortune might be contagious. "I'm sorry," Gerda whispered, "for what I said. About you being dangerous. I was just scared," Astrid finished. "I know, so am I." When the sun reached its peak, Eric came to escort her to the great hall. But the hall had been transformed. The long tables were pushed against the walls. In the center, a large circle had been cleared, marked with stones. Around it sat the most powerful men Astrid had ever seen in one place. Jarls in fine furs and silver arm rings, wealthy merchants with gold-threaded cloaks, warriors whose scars told stories of battles. Survived. And at the head of the circle, on his carved chair, sat Halvard. Ragnhild stood behind his chair, her face a mask of careful neutrality. but her hands gripped the wood so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Bjorn was not there. Thank the gods for small mercies. "Bring forward the thrall, Astrid." Halvard's voice rang out with formal authority. Eric guided her into the center of the circle. Every eye in the room locked onto her, judging, measuring. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed contempt. A few showed something that looked uncomfortably like hunger, as if they were watching a sacrifice about to be made. Halvard stood. 7 days ago, during the feast celebrating the trade agreements between our 3 clans, my son Bjorn choked on meat. He was dying. Our healers attempted intervention using traditional methods, but the obstruction would not clear. He paused, letting the words settle. This thrall, acting without permission or instruction, performed an unknown technique that saved my son's life. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Astrid kept her eyes on the floor, counting the stones in the circle. 1, 2, 3, 4. Since then, Halvard continued, there has been much debate about the nature of her actions. Was it divine intervention? Dark magic? Simple fortune? The purification rituals showed no evidence of supernatural influence. The runes cast no shadow on her character. Yet the question remains, what do we do with a thrall who breaks all protocol to save the life of an heir? She should be rewarded. The voice belonged to Jarl Magnus, an older man with a silver beard who ruled the coastal territories to the north. My grandson choked to death 2 winters ago. If someone, anyone, had known what to do, he might still live. This knowledge should be shared, not punished. Knowledge? Einar stood abruptly, his face flushed. What knowledge? She admits she learned this from desperation, not training. She bypassed every proper healing method, ignored the wisdom of those qualified to treat the heir. If we reward such insubordination, we undermine the entire structure of our society. Structure that let a child nearly die, Magnus shot back. While you consulted your runes, this girl acted. That's not insubordination. That's courage. It's overstepping. Another voice, this one belonging to a heavy-set merchant named Olaf. Thralls who think themselves equal to healers today will think themselves equal to warriors tomorrow. Equal to merchants, equal to us. Where does it end? It ends with my son alive. Halvard's voice cut through the rising argument like a blade. That's where it ends, with my heir breathing instead of buried. The silence that followed was absolute. Halvard turned his attention to Astrid. You, speak. Tell the assembly exactly what happened. Leave nothing out. Astrid forced herself to raise her head, to meet his gaze. Her voice shook when she started speaking, but grew steadier as she went on. I was cleaning buckets near the kitchen entrance when I heard the sound, the choking sound. I looked up and saw Bjorn turning purple. His hands were at his throat. Everyone was frozen. She swallowed hard. I remembered my baby brother, 6 years ago, when I was 12. He choked on dried fish. I tried hitting his back, but it didn't work, so I grabbed him from behind and squeezed his stomach hard until the fish came out. It worked then. I hoped it would work again. You hoped? Einar's voice dripped with scorn. You risked the heir's life on hope? I risked nothing. The words burst out before Astrid could stop them. He was already dying. Your runes weren't helping. Your prayers weren't helping. In another minute he would have been dead and all your wisdom would have meant nothing. Gasps erupted around the circle. Thralls didn't speak to healers that way. Didn't speak to anyone that way. But Astrid couldn't stop now. The dam had broken. I didn't ask for this, she said, her voice raw. I didn't want to touch him. Didn't want to draw attention. I just wanted him to live. Because he's 6 years old and he'd done nothing wrong, and watching a child die when you know how to save them is... Her voice cracked. It's impossible. I couldn't do it. Even if it meant punishment. Even if it meant this. She gestured at the circle around her. I couldn't just stand there and let him die. The silence now was different. Heavier. Several of the Jarls were nodding slowly. Even Olaf looked uncomfortable. Magnus stood again. I call for a vote. This thrall acted to preserve the life of an heir. Her methods were unorthodox but effective. I say she deserves freedom for her service. Freedom? Einar sputtered. For a thrall, that's madness. It sets a dangerous precedent. What's dangerous, Magnus countered, is letting children die because we're too proud to learn from anyone beneath our station. I call for execution. Olaf rose, his face red. Not as punishment, but as necessity. She's caused discord, division. Better to remove the problem entirely. Astrid's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Freedom or execution, life or death. Decided by men who didn't know her, didn't care about her, saw her as nothing more than a problem to solve. There's a third option. Ragnhild's voice was soft, but it carried through the hall like a bell. Every head turned to look at her. She stepped out from behind Halvard's chair, her face pale but determined. We could teach her methods to our healers, make her knowledge useful to the entire clan. Keep her here, but give her purpose beyond servitude. Einar looked like he'd swallowed something rotten. My lady, you can't seriously suggest— I can suggest whatever I want. Ragnhild's eyes flashed. My son lives because of her. Whatever else she is, whatever problems her actions created, that fact remains unchanged. Halvard stood slowly. The assembly will vote, all in. Favor of execution? 3 hands rose. Olaf's thick arm shot up immediately, followed by 2 younger jarls Astrid didn't recognize. Men whose faces held the cold certainty of those who'd never questioned their place in the world's order. 3 votes for her death. Astrid's knees threatened to buckle. She locked them, forcing herself to remain standing, to show nothing. 3 men had just voted to end her life as casually as they might order another cup of mead. All in favor of freedom? Halvard's voice remained steady, but Astrid caught the tension in his jaw. Magnus's hand went up, then another jarl, older, with kind eyes and weather-beaten skin. Then 2 more, 4, 5, 6 hands total, more than execution. But was it enough? All in favor of the third option, Halvard said, teaching her methods while keeping her in service to this household. A dozen hands rose. Halvard's own hand joined them after a moment's hesitation. So did Torben's. Even some of the men who'd voted for freedom switched their support, nodding thoughtfully as if this compromise suddenly made sense. Einar sat with his arms crossed, his face a thundercloud. He'd raised his hand for nothing. The decision is made, Halvard announced. Astrid will remain in this household. She will teach her technique to our healers and any others who wish to learn. In return, her duties will be lightened. She will be given better quarters and adequate food. He paused, his eyes finding Astrid's. But she remains a thrall. Her status does not change. Is this understood? Yes, my lord. Astrid's voice came out steadier than she felt. Does anyone challenge this judgment? Silence. Even Olaf, though he looked displeased, said nothing. The assembly had spoken. To challenge now would be to challenge Halvard's authority in his own hall. Then this matter is settled. Halvard struck his staff against the floor 3 times. The thing is concluded. The jarls began to disperse, their voices rising in conversation. Some shot curious glances at Astrid. Others ignored her completely, already moving on to the next piece of business. To them, she'd been an interesting diversion, a brief interruption in more important matters. But to Astrid, the last hour had contained her entire future. Eric touched her elbow gently. Come on, before they change their minds. He led her out through a side door, away from the dispersing crowd. Astrid's legs felt strange, disconnected from her body. She'd survived. She was alive, but the weight of what had just happened pressed down on her chest like a physical thing. You did well in there, Eric said quietly as they walked. Speaking up like that took guts, took stupidity. Astrid muttered. I could have gotten myself killed. Maybe. But you made them see you as a person instead of just a problem. That matters. Did it? Astrid wasn't sure anymore. She was still a thrall, still property. The assembly had voted to use her, not free her. She'd traded one form of servitude for another. They turned a corner and nearly collided with Einar. The healer stood blocking the hallway, his face twisted with barely contained rage. "You," he hissed at Astrid. "You cost me everything. My reputation, my standing, the Jarl's trust. All because you got lucky with a dying child. I didn't what? Didn't mean to embarrass me in front of 3 clans? Didn't mean to make me look like a fool who stands by while thralls do my job better?" He stepped closer. Astrid could smell the herbs on his breath, see the broken blood vessels in his eyes. "You think this is over? You think teaching a few people your little trick makes you safe?" Eric moved between them. "Back off, Einar. The assembly has spoken." The assembly made a mistake. Einar's voice dropped to a whisper, but it lost none of its venom. And mistakes get corrected, one way or another. He pushed past them, his shoulder deliberately slamming into Astrid hard enough to make her stumble. Eric caught her arm, steadying her. "Don't listen to him," Eric said. "He's just bitter." But Astrid had heard the promise in Einar's words, the threat. This wasn't over, not for him. The new quarters turned out to be a small room off the main servants' hall. Not much bigger than a closet, really, but it had an actual door, a narrow bed with real blankets instead of straw, a tiny window that let in light. After 4 years of sleeping on the floor with 20 other thralls, it felt like a palace. Hilda came by that evening with bread, cheese, and dried fish. More food than Astrid usually saw in 3 days. "Eat," the overseer commanded. "You start teaching tomorrow. Can't have you fainting from hunger in front of the Jarl's healers. Would make us all look bad." Astrid picked at the food, her stomach too knotted to eat properly. "Hilda, what do the other thralls think about all this?" The older woman was quiet for a long moment. "Some are happy for you. Think you deserved recognition. Others." She trailed off meaningfully. "Think I've made things harder for everyone. Change always makes things harder before it makes them easier." Hilda moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, girl, I think you did right. That boy would be dead otherwise. Dead children don't care about protocol." After Hilda left, Astrid sat on her new bed and let herself shake. Let herself feel the terror she'd been holding back all day. She'd stood before the thing. Had been. Judged by Jarls and warriors and powerful men who could have ordered her death with a single word. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Before she could answer, the door cracked open. Ragnhild slipped inside, closing it quickly behind her. "My lady?" Astrid scrambled to her feet. "You shouldn't. I know where I should and shouldn't be." Ragnhild's voice was tired. She looked exhausted, older than her years, carrying burdens Astrid couldn't begin to imagine. "I came to say thank you for what you said in there about not being able to watch a child die. I only spoke the truth." "I know." Ragnhild's eyes were wet, and it made me realize something. I've been so focused on protecting Bjorn from everything that I forgot the simplest truth of motherhood. Sometimes the people who can help our children aren't the ones we'd choose, aren't the ones who make sense. They're just the ones who are there when it matters. She reached into her dress and pulled out a small cloth bundle. "Here. For teaching my son's savior technique to others, you should have something better than rags to demonstrate with." Astrid unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a simple wooden pendant carved in the shape of a mother holding a child. Nothing fancy, nothing valuable. But the craftsmanship was exquisite, every detail lovingly rendered. "I made it," Ragnhild said quietly. "After I lost Freya. Carved it during the long nights when I couldn't sleep. When I was trying to remember what it felt like to hold her." She wiped her eyes. "I want you to have it. As a reminder that sometimes the hands we think are cursed are actually the ones doing the God's work." Astrid's throat was too tight to speak. She clutched the pendant, feeling the smooth wood against her scarred palms. "I won't pretend we're equals," Ragnhild continued. "I can't change what you are, and neither can the Assembly's vote. But I can acknowledge that you saved the most precious thing in my world, and I can make sure you're treated with the respect that action deserves." She moved toward the door, then turned back one last time. "Teach them well, Astrid. Teach them so that no other mother has to watch her child suffocate while everyone stands frozen." That's all I ask." Then she was gone, leaving Astrid alone with a wooden pendant and the crushing weight of expectations she'd never asked to carry. The teaching began at dawn. Astrid stood in the healing chamber facing 8. People who looked at her with expressions ranging from skeptical curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Einar sat in the back corner, his arms crossed, his face a mask of cold contempt. The 2 elderly healers flanked him, whispering to each other behind gnarled hands. But there were others too. Magnus had sent his personal healer, a sharp-eyed woman named Sigrun, who carried herself with quiet authority. 2 younger apprentices, barely older than Astrid herself, clutched writing tablets. And, standing by the door, watching everything with hawkish intensity, was Torben. Halvard's way of making sure nothing went wrong. "Begin," Torben said simply. Astrid's mouth went dry. She'd mucked out stables, scrubbed floors, hauled water for 4 years. She'd never taught anyone anything, didn't know how to command a room or make her voice carry with authority. But she thought of Bjorn's purple face, of her baby brother's blue lips, of all the children who might choke in the future, who might die, because no one knew what to do. "The technique is called abdominal thrusts," she began, her voice shaky. "At least, that's what I call it. I don't know if it has a proper name." "It doesn't," Sigrun said. Her voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "I've traveled to many lands, studied with healers from the east and west. I've never encountered this method." "Because it's not a method," Einar interjected. "It's a desperate act that happened to work once. Twice, if we believe her story about her." "Brother, would you prefer I demonstrate on you?" Astrid's words came out sharper than she'd intended. The room went silent. Even the apprentices stopped writing. Einar's face flushed red. "How dare?" "She makes a fair point," Sigrun interrupted smoothly. "Understanding requires demonstration. Astrid, show us using one of the apprentices." "Gently," she added with the faintest hint of a smile. The younger of the 2 apprentices, a gangly boy named Leif, volunteered nervously. Astrid positioned herself behind him, explaining each step as she went. "When someone is choking, they can't speak or cough. They turn colors, purple then blue. Their hands go to their throat like this." She demonstrated. "That's how you know it's a true blockage, not just coughing." "And if they can cough?" one of the elderly healers asked. "Then you wait. Let them cough it out themselves. But if they can't cough, can't make any sound, you need to act fast." She placed her fist below Leif's ribcage. "Make a fist here, below the ribs, above the navel. Wrap your other hand around it, then pull inward and upward, hard, like you're trying to lift them off their feet." She demonstrated the motion slowly, carefully. Leif gasped slightly at the pressure but nodded that he was all right. "How hard?" Sigrun asked. "Be specific." "Hard enough that it might hurt them. Hard enough that you might bruise their ribs." Astrid met the healer's eyes. "But not hard enough to break bones. You need force to push the air from their lungs to create pressure that dislodges whatever's stuck. But you need control too." "Impossible to judge," Einar muttered. "Too hard and you rupture organs. Too soft and it doesn't work. This is why proper healing requires years of training, not guesswork." "It's not guesswork." Astrid's patience was wearing thin. "It's practice. You learn how much pressure by doing it, by feeling the resistance, by risking lives while you learn." Einar stood abruptly. "This is madness. We're being asked to adopt a technique that has no basis in traditional healing, no blessing from the gods, no verification beyond the word of a thrall who got lucky." "Lucky?" Astrid whirled to face him. "I saved 2 lives with this technique. 2 children who would have died while you consulted runes and burned herbs and waited for divine intervention that wasn't coming. You disrespect the gods. I respect life." Astrid's voice rose. "I respect children who deserve to breathe, if the gods wanted them dead. They wouldn't have given us hands capable of saving them." The silence that followed was absolute. Astrid realized she'd just committed heresy in front of witnesses, questioned divine will. challenged the fundamental belief that healers were vessels for godly wisdom. But Sigrun was nodding slowly. She's right, you know. We've become so dependent on ritual that we've forgotten healing is also action, immediate, decisive action. This is exactly what I warned about. Einar's voice shook with rage. Give thralls a voice and they'll question everything. The gods, the social order, everything that keeps our world stable. Stable? Astrid couldn't stop now, even though she knew she should. A world where children die because we're too proud to learn from anyone beneath us isn't stable. It's fragile and cruel. Torben stepped forward before Einar could respond. Enough philosophy. We're here to learn a technique, not debate theology. His single eye fixed on Astrid. Show. Them again. All of them. Make sure they can do it properly. For the next 3 hours, Astrid worked with each person in the room. Even the elderly healers, grudgingly, came forward to practice. She positioned their hands, corrected their pressure, explained the angle and force needed. Sigrun picked it up immediately, her movements precise and confident. The apprentices struggled but improved with repetition. Einar refused to participate. He sat in his corner, watching with cold eyes, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound book. As the sun climbed toward midday, Halvard entered the chamber. Bjorn was with him, holding his father's hand. The boy's face lit up when he saw Astrid. "Are you teaching them?" Bjorn asked excitedly. "Are you teaching them how to save people like you saved me?" "I'm trying," Astrid said softly. Halvard addressed the room. "I want every healer in my employ to learn this technique. Every warrior too. Anyone who might be present when someone chokes. We've already sent word to the other clans. Magnus is implementing the same training in his territories." He looked directly at Einar. "This is not optional. This is not subject to debate. This is law." Einar's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "Good." Halvard's hand rested on Bjorn's head. "My son has something he wants to say." Bjorn stepped forward, his small face serious beyond his years. "I want everyone to learn what Astrid knows, because what happened to me was scary and I don't want it to happen to other kids. And if it does happen, I want someone to know how to help them." His voice wavered slightly. "Astrid saved me because she was brave. I want all of you to be brave too." Several of the healers looked uncomfortable. Sigrun smiled. Even one of the elderly healers wiped at his eyes. But Einar's expression had gone beyond anger into something colder, something calculating. As Halvard led Bjorn out of the chamber, Einar caught Astrid's eye. The look he gave her promised that this wasn't over. That praise from the Jarl's son had just made her an even bigger problem. After the session ended, as the others filed out, Sigrun approached Astrid. "You did well today. Teaching is harder than healing sometimes." "I don't know what I'm doing," Astrid admitted. "None of us do. Not really. We just pretend better." Sigrun glanced toward the door where Einar had disappeared. "Be careful of that one. A healer whose pride is wounded is more dangerous than any illness. He's already made that clear. Then watch your back, and your food, and anything else he might tamper with." Sigrun's voice was matter of fact, not dramatic, just stating obvious truth. Men like Einar don't forgive public humiliation. They just wait for the right moment to balance the scales. She left before Astrid could respond, leaving behind a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. That night, Astrid lay in her small room clutching Ragnhild's wooden pendant. She'd survived the thing, survived the first day of teaching. But Sigrun's warning echoed in her mind. This wasn't over, not by a long measure. She'd made an enemy of a man with knowledge of every poison, every herb, every subtle way to make someone sick or dead without leaving obvious traces, and there was nothing she could do but wait. 3 weeks passed. Astrid taught 12 more sessions, training healers from visiting clans, warriors who wanted to protect their families, even some of the wealthier free women who attended out of curiosity. The technique spread like wildfire through the territories. Stories came back of lives saved. A merchant's daughter in the northern settlements, a farmer's son 2 villages over, a Jarl's nephew visiting from across the fjord. Each story reached Astrid through whispers and second-hand accounts. Each one felt surreal. Her desperate action in a moment of terror had become something larger than herself, something that would outlive her. But Einar's shadow still followed her everywhere. She found spoiled meat in her food twice. Both times she caught the smell before eating, threw it away, said nothing. Her door lock was broken one night, forcing her to sleep with a chair wedged against it. Small things, deniable things, but the message was clear. Then, on the 23rd day, everything changed. Astrid was walking back from the well, carrying water for the evening meal, when she heard shouting from the great hall. Not celebration shouting. Panic. She dropped the buckets and ran. Inside, chaos, servants rushing in every direction, Ragnhild screaming, cutting through everything else like a knife. And in the center of it all, Einar bent over Bjorn's small body on the floor. "No," Astrid breathed. "No, no, no." She shoved through the crowd. Bjorn was convulsing, his eyes rolled back, foam at his mouth. Einar had his hands on the boy's chest, pressing down rhythmically, but nothing was happening. The boy wasn't breathing. "What happened?" Astrid demanded. "Poison," Ragnhild sobbed. "Someone poisoned my son. Einar's trying to purge it, but—" Astrid looked closer. Bjorn's lips weren't blue. They were pale, but not from choking. His chest wasn't moving, no air going in or out. Einar's compressions were doing nothing because the boy's airway was blocked. "Move," Astrid said. Einar looked up, his face twisted with concentration. "I'm performing the purging ritual. His airway is blocked. Move." Astrid didn't wait for permission. She grabbed Bjorn, turned him on his side. His mouth was full of vomit. She swept it clear with her fingers, ignoring the disgusted gasps around her. Then she saw it, wedged at the back of his throat. A piece of something. Not food. Something else. "I need a hook," she said. Something thin and curved. Now. Someone thrust a small fishing hook into her hand. Astrid positioned Bjorn's head, tilted it back, used the hook to catch the obstruction. It came out slowly, terribly. A cloth. A small piece of cloth that had been soaked in something bitter-smelling. Poison, but not swallowed. Forced down his throat while he was distracted. Meant to kill him slowly, choking him from the inside. The moment the cloth came free, Astrid turned Bjorn face down and struck his back. Once, twice. On the third strike he coughed, then vomited again, this time bringing up bile tinged with whatever poison had soaked the cloth. Then finally he gasped, drew air. His eyes fluttered open, confused and terrified. "Mother?" His voice was barely a whisper. Ragnhild collapsed beside him, pulling him into her arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Halvard appeared from somewhere, wrapping both of them in his embrace. The room erupted in relief, prayers, shouts of joy. But Astrid was staring at Einar, at the healer who'd been performing the wrong treatment, who'd been pressing on a blocked airway instead of clearing it first. Who would have let Bjorn die while appearing to try to save him? Einar's face had gone gray. He was staring at the cloth in Astrid's hand with an expression that confirmed everything. "You," Astrid said quietly. The room went silent. "You did this." "That's insane," Einar sputtered. "I was trying to save him." "You were letting him die." Astrid held up the cloth. "This was placed deliberately, soaked in poison, shoved down his throat. And you knew. You knew his airway was blocked, but you kept doing chest compressions instead of clearing it. I was following. Proper protocol. You were murdering him." Astrid's voice rose, slowly, in front of witnesses, while pretending to help. Halvard stood slowly. His face had gone very still, very cold. "Einar, explain, now." The healer's composure cracked. "She ruined me. This thrall destroyed everything I built. My reputation, my standing, my life's work. All because she got lucky once. I gave my life to healing, and she made me look like a fool in front of 3 clans. So you tried to kill my son?" Halvard's voice was deadly quiet. I tried to restore order. Einar was shouting now, his face red, spittle flying. I tried to show that her methods were dangerous, that traditional healing was the right path, that thralls shouldn't be allowed to question their betters. If the boy had died from choking again, everyone would have blamed her technique, seen it for the dangerous innovation it was. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes violence. Torben moved first. He grabbed Einar by the throat, slamming him against the wall hard enough to rattle the tapestries. You tried to murder the heir to prove a point about social order? I tried to save us all from chaos, Einar gasped. Can't you see what she's done? Thralls teaching free men, property questioning protocol. Where does it end? When they demand freedom, when they demand equality. This was about preserving everything we are. Halvard's hand went to his sword. For a moment, Astrid thought he would draw it right. There, cut Einar down in the great hall in front of everyone. But Ragnhild spoke first. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Twice, she said, still holding Bjorn. Twice she saved my son. And twice she proved that the hands we think are cursed are often the ones doing the gods' work. She looked up at her husband. What does that tell you about the order we've built? About who deserves respect and who doesn't? Halvard stared at his wife for a long moment, then at Bjorn, who was clinging to his mother and watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. Then at Astrid, standing there with poisoned cloth in her scarred hands. Take Einar to the pit, he said finally. He'll stand trial at the next thing, for attempted murder of an heir. As guards dragged the screaming healer away, Halvard turned to the assembled crowd. Let this be a lesson. Wisdom doesn't belong only to the highborn. Courage doesn't belong only to warriors. And life-saving knowledge doesn't care about the status of the hands that wield it. He walked to Astrid, placed both hands on her shoulders. You've saved my son twice, given me back my heir when I'd thought him lost. No amount of silver or status can repay that debt. I don't want repayment, my lord. I just want... Astrid stopped. What did she want? Freedom? She'd never asked for it. Recognition? It terrified her. Safety? That seemed impossible now. I just want children to live, she said finally. That's all. Just let them live. Halvard nodded slowly. Then, in front of everyone, he did something unprecedented. He removed one of his silver arm rings, placed it on Astrid's wrist. You're free, he said, as of this moment. And if you choose to stay, you'll do so as a healer in your own right, with full standing and full voice. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Ragnhild was crying again, but smiling through the tears. Bjorn had broken free from his mother and wrapped himself around Astrid's legs. I told you, the boy said into her dress. I told you you were a hero. Astrid looked down at the silver on her wrist, at the child clutching her, at the crowd of faces that would never see her the same way again. She thought about her mother, dead in childbirth, about her brother, sold away, about all the years of being invisible, being nothing, being less than human. And she thought about how sometimes the most important revolutions start with a single desperate act, with scarred hands that refuse to let a child die, with the simple, radical belief that every life deserves fighting for. I'll stay, she said quietly, and I'll teach anyone who wants to learn, free or thrall, highborn or low, because choking doesn't care about status, and neither should salvation. Halvard smiled, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen on his face. Then welcome, healer Astrid. May your hands save many more lives. As the crowd pressed forward to congratulate her, to touch the silver ring, to hear the story of what happened, Astrid caught Ragnhild's eye across the room. The lady nodded once, a gesture of respect, of understanding, of two mothers who'd learned that protecting children sometimes meant letting go of old certainties. And for the first time in 4 years, Astrid allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world could change after all. Astrid's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. How many times do we judge someone's worth by their position instead of their character? How many voices do we silence simply because they come from unexpected places? She was nobody, owned nothing, had every reason to stay invisible and protect herself. But when a child's life hung in the balance, she risked everything because she believed one simple, radical truth: every life deserves fighting for. Now ask yourself, would you have had that courage? Would you have stepped forward knowing it might cost you everything? Or would you have stayed silent, safe in the shadows, telling yourself it wasn't your place to act? The most profound revolutions don't always come from kings or warriors. Sometimes they come from scarred hands that refuse to let a child die. Sometimes they come from people the world has decided don't matter, proving that wisdom, courage, and compassion recognize no hierarchy. Astrid didn't just save a boy twice. She saved an entire community from the arrogance of believing that status determines worth. Her legacy wasn't written in silver or freedom. It was written in every life. Her technique would go on to save, in every person who learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is act when everyone else freezes. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about courage and worth, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us of our shared humanity, because stories like Astrid's don't just entertain us, they challenge us to be better, to see clearly, and to remember that greatness often comes from the most unexpected places.